Welcome back to our breaking news coverage of the developing war in Iran. I'm Andrea Sanke, host of the Newsmakers, joining our continuing coverage here on TRT World, now 6 days into this war and no sign of compromise. Israel says it is now targeting Tehran and its vicinity, while U.S. Secretary of Defense or War Pete Hegseth says U.S. attacks will only increase in force. Now, Gulf countries in Iran's crosshairs say the number of Iranian missile and drone launches are considerably less than in the first days of the war, but nevertheless, today there are reports of injuries in Abu Dhabi from falling debris. There's been an intense Iranian missile barrage aimed at Qatar, as well as continued drone and missile launches directed at Israel. Now, with no clear indication of what the U.S. and Israel really plan to achieve here, there are growing fears in the Gulf Arab states over what could unfold within Iran in the coming months.
When we talk to the countries in the region, they are also worried about, civil wars inside Iran because of the regime's leadership and what is going on there.
Now, Iran's leaders have issued very few statements so far, but in a rare call for retaliation from one of the country's highest religious figures, Ayatollah Abdullah Amoli, he said Iran is on the verge of a great test, and he called for the shedding of Zionist blood as well as the shedding of President Trump's blood. He also urged Iranians to, quote, fight the oppressive America. Now, hopefully joining us later in the program, we will have our guest from inside Iran. As soon as we get that connection established, we will go to Tehran. But first, let's speak to our panelists joining us from Washington. Republican strategist and former Republican candidate for Congress, Amanda Makki, from Tel Aviv, co-founder and executive director of the Middle East Treaty Organization, Sharon Dolev, and from Washington, D.C., research fellow in the Middle East program at the Quincy Institute, Annelle Sheline. Thank you all so much for being with me. Amanda, I'm going to start with you because I need you to first tell us why you are one of the members of the camp that is so confident that the U.S. really is doing the right thing here.
Well, as someone who was born in Tehran right before the revolution happened, I can tell you that for 47 years, it's just been one evil after another against the people of Iran. This government has been so brutal, has been so barbaric, and there isn't a single person who doesn't acknowledge how terrible this regime has been to its own people. But it's not only limited to that. Look at the terrorism plots that they've had throughout the world in the last 47 years. They've killed American soldiers. They have committed so many evil things that it is time. And I am so happy that there's an American president who, for the first time in 47 years, has said, we're going to do this. We're going to go in and we are going to liberate the people of Iran. And I think it's a very proud moment for Iranians. Of course, this doesn't come with heartache and worries. We can't reach our family members in Iran, but we know that this has to happen in order for there to be peace in the world and freedom for the people of Iran.
Okay, Amanda, I mean, you described exactly what many had described in the lead up to the war in Iraq. And as you are very aware, many are making rather logical comparisons between the invasion of Iraq and what is happening now with Iran. As for Iraq, ultimately they got total destabilization, extremists, including Daesh, taking control, a good minimum 1 decade of total insecurity. Is that what you want for Iran?
Of course not. What we want is stability in the region. And in order for there to be stability in the region, you can't have a country that says death to America, death to Israel, having a nuclear program. You can't have them creating nuclear weapons. You do need to demilitarize them. You need to de-arm them. And you need to make sure that we create stability there. And the only way that that can happen when a country like Iran is funding the Houthis, the Hamas, Hezbollah, is to take them out, take their leadership out. And it is so interesting that the people of Iran want this. It's amazing that the people of Iran would want to see this change happen, knowing what they're going to be up against. But life is so difficult and so oppressive in that country, a country that killed over 30,000 of its own people for merely protesting just 70 days ago. That is a country that people can't live in. They can't afford to live. So this is actually better than what they have.
Let me get another perspective then from Washington. Annelle, is that justification enough that you're hearing?
Absolutely not. This is in no way in U.S. interests. And the fact that for the first time since the 1990s, Netanyahu has found a U.S. president who's dumb enough to drag the United States into war on Israel's behalf is extremely depressing. In addition to the fact that we just saw yesterday the Senate fail to move forward a war powers resolution, clearly with the Republicans are, as you pointed out already, Andrea, this is so similar to the war in Iraq. This idea that Saddam Hussein posed some kind of existential threat to the United States was a complete fabrication and a lie. Similarly, the idea that Iran posed any kind of threat to the United States is a complete fabricated lie. So in no way is it in U.S. interest to be dragged into this war, and yet Netanyahu has managed to achieve that.
Let me ask Sharon then, because from within Israel, you have a number of people really singing the same tune as you hear supporters like Amanda. They truly believe that this armed action serves their own security, that Iran is an existential threat to Israel. You, Sharon, are part of effectively the minority, a very small minority, really, according to many polls in Israel. So what do you say to the justification for war? Hold on, Sharon, 1 second. I don't think we have your audio correct. Let's get that fixed.
Sorry, that's because I forgot to unmute.
Go ahead, go
and
ahead.
That's because
go ahead.
we have a night full of sirens. So I totally agree with Amanda. The regime in Iran is a horrible regime. Having said that, the regime in Israel is not that amazing either, and the United States regime is also not, the most human rights lover. But in order to bring stability, there is a need for negotiations, and this war, more than killing people, killed diplomacy. Now, yes, I am a minority in Israel. However, we have an excuse. The excuse that we have is the ambiguity, the opacity around our own nuclear weapons, and the secrecy became a taboo. That means that the media in Israel is part of the taboo. They're afraid to say anything nuclear. They're afraid to ask questions. But that's not the case in the US. It's not the case in the UK. So what is the excuse there? If Iran wanted, if we just apply logical thinking, it will be amazing. If Iran is on the verge of becoming a nuclear armed state for 30 years, maybe that's exactly why Iran wanted to be a threshold state, a state that has the capacity to build nuclear weapon without building nuclear weapons. And if this war done something, is to push Iran to need or to think that it needs nuclear weapons, because if they had nuclear weapons, this wouldn't happen. At the end of this war, we will have an agreement, some kind of agreement. But surprise, we already had an agreement. It was a good agreement. Even the Israeli Atomic Agency Commission, not my friends, said that the JCPOA, the Iran deal from 2015, was a good deal. So the only thing that was not good with it was that it was dangerous for Netanyahu. Netanyahu keeps his seat with the premises of he's the only one that can keep us safe from Iran. Suddenly there is a deal. The deal is good. What now? Will he have to actually act on behalf of Israeli citizens or preserve peace? The real Iranian threat was always the Ring of Fire. But for the Ring of Fire and for the conventional threats like missiles, he had to have agreements, and that's something that Netanyahu refused to do.
Okay.
And sadly, Trump was pushed by Netanyahu to break a working deal and to put us all in danger again.
Okay, let me turn back to Amanda then, because I'd like to look further then at the dynamics within the United States and within your party, and ask how you see the actual MAGA divide in supporters that are supporting the attack on Iran as you are, and the real danger that it could pose to the administration going into an election now, not least over the economic consequences of what is happening here. How do you reconcile the danger there and what your support is for this ultimate military action?
And therein lies the challenge. We do have midterm elections that are coming up this November, and this is going to weigh heavily on people's minds, especially if this drags on. I think that's why you heard the president and the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, give a somewhat time certain 4 to 6 week timeline of when this will happen. We're already seeing the ballistic capabilities of Iran minimized by 86% is what they are reporting today. So if they are able to keep this on some kind of a very short timeline, I think the American people will be with them. And I think that the MAGA base will be with them because they understand the existential threat of Iran, and a nuclear Iran at that, a country that chants death to America, has for 47 years. We understand what we're up against. However, the MAGA base of this party was always about not starting new wars and not fighting wars for other countries. So that is something that has to be reconciled. And I think the only way that it can be in a positive way for the Republican Party is to make sure that this is a short war, very few casualties, and that it ends swiftly and successfully. I think Marco Rubio is a very effective communicator. We know the why. The American people understand the why. They want to know how and how long. And I think that's important to be communicated as well.
Okay. Annelle, I mean, would you agree there's arguably a lack of communication here? And would you agree with what Amanda sees as the potential endgame for all of this, and that the MAGA base could be reunited in spite of these divisions over this military action that was promised actually not to happen? No more foreign wars.
I would push back against the notion that the American people understand the why. I think this is why you have 4 out of 5 Americans that did not support this, that said, how on earth does it support our interests? It's costing the United States $1 billion a day. And specifically to the question of MAGA, how is this America first in any way to be expending this amount of resources on a country that did not pose a threat to the United States? Iran was not capable of reaching the United States. It merely was seen as posing a threat to Israel, although even that I would contest. It was not eager to reinitiate the 12-day war. This is why you saw Iran negotiating to end that war back in June. And at the time, the United States was also interested in bringing that to a close. Whereas this time, what you're seeing is all sides buckling down for this to continue. We have Trump talking about boots on the ground, supporting Kurdish fighters. This would obviously be a huge red flag for Turkey. And yet we have Israeli politicians like Naftali Bennett saying that Turkey could be next on the list of a country that Israel perceives as a threat. Cannot be acceptable for there to be a strong Turkish military and government that could potentially threaten Israel. This is Israel's vision, is to take out powerful countries around it. I would warn the Saudis to also be cautious, because Israel's not interested in having any powerful country around it in the region that could challenge military hegemony. And now Netanyahu has in the White House Trump, someone who is clearly has no interest in maintaining his campaign promises of no new wars, no new forever wars, and following the sugar high of the perceived success of Venezuela, thought that this aggression against Iran could be over by the weekend. When that didn't happen, now suddenly he's doubling down and getting the American people ready for this to be a much longer engagement, which the Americans are very much opposed to and could really cost the Republicans in the midterm.
And now let me look at another argument being made here I shouldn't say argument, because it's been reported now on the fringes somewhat that another justification for this attack on Iran is the role that these kind of extremist religious contingents are playing in this conflict, both in Israel and the United States, with certain supporters believing their leaders, being Trump and Netanyahu, are basically appointed by God to bring about this biblical destiny that they desire. Some are just calling it outright Armageddon, but it's in the book, as they will say. So speak to that from the U.S. perspective. Now that it's coming out through military leadership, that this is part of the motivation that some are believing in, how does the American public respond to that?
It's shocking to hear these kinds of statements coming from people like Pete Hegseth, and we've had, I believe, over 100 complaints from members of the military saying, what is this nonsense we're being fed about the fact that this is a religious war and we're being asked to fight on the basis of religion. I mean, it ties into what the U.S. ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, recently said, where he said he would be fine with this idea of a greater Israel, of Israel expanding its borders to include all of the surrounding countries. I mean, this is insanity that you have these radical Christian Zionists that are fully on board with this expansionist Israeli agenda. And I simply hope that the countries in the region that have long depended on the United States for their security, whether it's the Saudi, the Gulf countries that are now being attacked as a result, countries in Europe or Turkey, are reconsidering their reliance on the United States, which is clearly not acting rationally, is clearly pursuing this messianic agenda, and has such a massively powerful and well-resourced military that it really can just wreak total havoc on this region. And to get back to something that we heard earlier about the need to liberate the people of Iran, just to remind people, when the United States starts talking about the need to liberate people, those, think about Afghanistan and Iraq, or Libya, that those people often end up dead. And so while I very much feel for the plight of people inside Iran and understand their opposition to their tyrannical government, to bomb this country to smithereens and completely destroy it, and then for the United States and Israel to walk away and leave it in utter chaos, this could not only be devastating for the people of Iran, but for the entire region.
Okay. Sharon, let me come to you because I would like first for you to speak on the same line about the religious contingent of this, believing that this is a biblical duty some members of the Israeli regime or the Israeli military actually feel needs to be fought on those grounds.
To be honest, in Israel, it's not as much. And I want to remind somebody, I mean, our religious people, the ultra-Orthodox, you can see because they have a certain way of dressing, and the same in Iran. The Americans, the US is I think, more fundamentalist state than we are, and to an extent, maybe even more than Iran, especially because they dress like everybody else, and they just look normal. In Israel, we have a different problem. We have a government. Annelle said Israel might attack this and might attack that, but it's actually this government. And this government is a government of Netanyahu and such extreme parties that no other leader of Likud in the past thought that they are okay to sit with. And it was Likud that banned them from being in parliament, right? So, yeah, we have the most extreme religious party ever existed in Israel, but we also have elections soon. So I don't think that these talks of attack every power in the region is something that Israel is really considering. But it is election year, and this government is filled with not just lunatics, but people that would have never got a seat in parliament, definitely not a seat in the government, if Netanyahu didn't need dwarfs, sorry to say, around him that just say yes to everything he says. So we hear for the first time really marginalized people with big microphones.
Okay. Let me,
for the first time.
Sorry, Sharon,
Yeah.
finish your thought there.
I said, I think that for the first time, the opposition is in Israel, they don't know how to speak nuclear issues yet. However, there's much bigger opening. I mean, in Israel in the past, I couldn't talk to them, but last week I was speaking in the parliament, and I give lectures almost daily to organizations that were afraid to touch the nuclear issue, but now they want to. They understand that there's a lot that they don't understand. They understand that this war is probably not for our benefit. However, we're since October 7 and before that, with the trial to make Israel a dictatorship de facto, people are tired. I mean, people arrived to this war without the ability to say something against it because they were so tired. So
Okay.
that's why you don't see demonstrations.
Okay.
But I do believe to
Yeah.
bring this government to an end.
Let me turn to Amanda then. And Amanda, I'll let you comment on the last two analyses you just heard. And if you can, actually address the irony that now we have what some identify as a religious extremist belief in the United States that justifies this action via biblical verse, while you're fighting a theocracy in Iran that actually uses similar arguments for their existence as well.
I mean, honestly, that's not what you're hearing in the media in the United States. I mean, you're just not hearing people talk about this as a religious war. They're talking about it in very concrete terms. If a country can destroy the lives of its own people to the tune of over 30,000 people who just expressed their voice.
No, there are
that is
American
a
leaders in the
country
military in
that
particular justifying this as this is Trump's role from God to bring about this biblical outcome.
I'm just saying you're not really hearing that. They might be saying that. That's not really the standard line that you're hearing. I mean, people are talking about this in the terms of what Iran has done to create unrest, terrorism in the last 47 years. So that's what everyone's referring to. If you listen to speeches
I'm not
on
sure
the
that's
House
everyone
floor,
because
Senate floor,
I've
that's
seen
what people are talking
multiple news outlets address this and with millions of viewers. So it is out there, and the American public has been made aware that there is now. Go ahead.
And I'm not disagreeing with you that it might be. A lot of people are saying a lot of things. There's a lot happening right now in the world. So yes, I'm sure that's part of the conversation, but that is not the general message. The general message is the terrorism and the conflict and what Iran has done to American soldiers, what America is doing, or what Iran is doing to the Gulf states who are on defense right now. They don't know why they're being attacked. Of course, we all know Iran's trying to pressure them so that they pressure the United States to say, tell them to back off. But why is Iran attacking these countries? People are talking about what the Iranian regime has done, what it's done to its own people, and why the people in Iran want this. And so when you've had all these uprisings of the Iranian young people in particular in the movements, 2009, 2010, a rigged election, Iranians come out, they wanted the support of President Obama. He said no. And here we are. First time that a United States president says we're going to do something because this has to stop. And so what people are talking about, they may be talking about religious wars, but the overarching theme is facts. It's facts of what Iran has done for the last 47 years to create unrest, kill its own people for merely protesting, for taking off the hijab, that they killed Mahsa Amini 2 years ago because she dared to take the hijab off, and then they said she had a brain aneurysm.
Okay.
They beat her to death. This
Amanda?
is what this country does, and that's what people are talking about.
Okay, at this point, I'm sorry for interrupting, but I'm actually going to turn our attention to Tehran, where we are joined by Mohammed Eslami. He is a research fellow at the University of Tehran, and we can get his perspective now on exactly what's happening on the ground, or at least from your perspective, what is happening, Mohammed, because we heard from an American perspective that the Iranian people basically want this. And obviously there's many differences in opinion, and American intelligence has been proven at many times to have gotten it wrong. So tell us, first of all, what you see the Iranian public, how you feel they're responding to this action. Has it united people or divided people in favor or against the regime in power?
Okay, first of all, thank you so much for having me in your program. I should say that in Iran, like every other countries, we do have some kind of fascism ideas that they are thinking about the politics, not in a way that it's about the realities, but it's about their ideology. So yes, we, as we saw in about the Iranian diaspora around the world, they are supporting Israel, they are supporting killing the victims in Gaza, and after that, they are supporting the this kind of military attack against their own country. And it's a matter of question for every other persons, besides these kind of, not all of the diaspora, but some of them, that how they are supporting the attack on their own motherland country. So regarding the country, if anyone wants to know what's happening right now in Iran, they should see what's happening after the martyrdom of the supreme leader. There are thousands and thousands of people that are gathering every night in every city in Tehran. They are supporting the country. They are supporting the military attacks to Israelis and also the United States bases around Iran. So
okay, but we also
Iran,
did see,
everybody knows that this.
We did earlier see tens of thousands of people take to the streets protesting against the government in power. So then let me ask you on that, what you make of the European Union's comments, the latest comments we actually heard at the top of the program, that this external action could foment internal civil war.
Yeah. Let me first tell you about the protests in Iran. We have in Iran protests, but I think Senator Ted Cruz himself answered your question. He said that there are lots of Mossad agents, they were in Iran, and they turned a peaceful protest in Iran to a kind of conflict between these agents and the military forces. So I don't want to say that it was a bad happening. All of us were sad because of that 2 days. And it was a kind of manipulation of the protest by the Americans and by the Israelis. They are openly talking about this. This is not a kind of hiding something. They are openly talking about this. And regarding the conflict, I should say that for the Iranians, they understood that this is not a war for the interest of the American people.